Hey pilots, DrainMan here, and today I have a very special video. Today we are going to learn how to build a high-end 6S racing drone. Alright, for starters we are going to be using the T-Motor stack. This is a very high-powered stack. It is also a very expensive stack. This stack is coming in at $110. This is going to be a high-end racing drone. When I say that, we are going to be using premium parts. And what that means is they are not going to be cheap. They are also not going to fly like crap. So if you're looking to build a budget drone, this video is not for you. So far we've unboxed our stack a little bit. We've opened up the ESC. This is a high-powered ESC. It's got a heat sink right on top. It is a BL Heli 32. And as far as the flight controller goes, it is an F4. It's got 6 UARTs and plenty of power. If you're more interested in this stack, I do have a video on it. I will drop that link down in the video description. Be sure to go ahead and check that out because who knows, you might want to put it in your next build. The T-Motor stack does come with some very long M3 screws. I recommend using those for your build, for your stack, because they are long enough to hold the ESC and the flight controller. If you're interested in this screwdriver I'm using, I really like it. I consider it a must-have when I build a quad, and you can go ahead and find a video on it down in the video description. Once you've got your ESC mounted on your frame, you're going to want to go ahead and tin your motor pads because that's one of the things that you're going to have to do first. I do like to get that out of the way first, so if you're building this along with me, let's go ahead and get this part out of the way. That way, when it's time to put our motors on, our pads are ready to go. Another thing is, too, you don't want to tin your pads and then right after solder up your motors. If I can help it, I don't do that because then you're getting the ESC really hot. So I like to tin them all, let it cool down, and then I'll come back and I'll put my motors on after. I also like to give them a quick cleaning with some alcohol. Rubbing alcohol is your friend when you're working with any type of electronic components or anything like that. For this frame, I've decided to go with the TransTEC Lightning V2X. And I really like this frame. I feel like the structure is strong. It's lightweight. I just feel quality when I feel it. It is kind of expensive. It's closer to $100. I want to say it's about 60, 70 bucks for this frame, but it's a phenomenal frame and it soft mounts my camera. I really like it. Okay, so our frame is built. Our ESC is mounted. It is time to put our motors on. We've pre-tinned the pads. So now we can go around, put on all 4 motors, then cut them to length and solder them up because our pads are ready for us. This frame here, I did want to mention, I do have a build video on this frame if you're curious, maybe you want to learn more about it or maybe you've already got it and you want to see how it goes together. I got a video on it. I'll put that down in the video description for you. Now, for our motors, I've made a very fine choice. At least I feel that way right now. This is one of my go-to motors, I shall say, and this is the Hype Train Vanover motor. It is a 6S motor. It's coming in at 2207.5, and it is a 1860 kV. So it's a very fast motor. It's probably going to require a throttle cap, which is phenomenal because I have a video on that too. I'll put it down in the video description. But the beautiful thing about a throttle cap is once you get in tune with your quad and you're really feeling it and you're really doing your thing, you can go ahead and the flick of a switch, you can literally make your quad faster. So I'm absolutely in love with the idea and I love doing it like this. And for these motors, I'm not going to show you all 4 getting put on. You can see one, you'll know what it is, you'll know how to do it. And then from there, you can do the rest on your own, and then we'll reconvene and we'll meet back here in the middle. As far as putting your motors on, you are going to want to use some Loctite. I found that with the Vanover motor has been one of the very few, very only motors that actually come with more than one freaking option for a screw size. Everybody knows that our frames are 4 millimeters, 5 millimeters, and then they give us these 3 millimeter screws, and we got no way to connect it. Okay, we are moving right along. The next thing I'm going to show you is going to be some CLR racing LEDs, and they're basically no more than race wire. That's all it is. It's race wire. If for any reason you're not familiar with race wire, all it is a space where you stop the motor wires, put a piece of PCB or LEDs or whatever you're putting, and you skip a spot. Basically, it's the spot where the end of your props would land. So if you crashed, bent a prop, and tried to take back off, you would not hit your motor wires, which is a big plus because you'd rather tear up your LED or frame than your freaking motor wires. So right now we're going to tin those and we are going to get those put on. These are also going to be a little bit repetitive or redundant, so I'm not going to show you all 4 of them. I'm just going to do one with you, and then you'll know how to do the rest. So yeah, you're going to spend an extra $8, $10, whatever it is on the race wire, but you're really saving yourself a lot of future trouble. Also, this is a high-end build, so we're not going to be shy when it comes to spending another $10 to make our quad that much stronger or that much better. Don't forget to tin your wires too. Don't be trying to just stick fresh wire on a tin pad. You want to get your wire tinned and you want to get your pad tinned. And then watch here how I touch them together. Boom. And it's almost like magic. You don't really even need much heat. You just touch it and it's good. We're going to grab the next one. And we're just going to touch it on here. And poof, it'll be together. One cool perk about the CLR Racing LEDs is they have staggered the pads. Because I know you're thinking, man, these pads are awful close. What if I touch? Well, they staggered them for you, so that shouldn't happen. And here it is. We've got our race wire ready to go. Our LED race wire soldered up. We've got plenty of excess wire. Now I'm going to show you all 4 of them. I went ahead and got them ready. No need for you to watch it all happen. Yours should look like this. And it's looking good. It's going to make life easy. And I'm going to show you the next step in installing these, at least the way that I do it. Not that it's right, not that it's wrong. It's just the way that DrainMan does it. If you want to do it like me, feel free. I've had great success with it. So now you're looking and you're noticing I've got extra wire here on the motor end going to the LED. I've got plenty of extra wire. And from the CLR Racing LED to the ESE, I've got plenty of wire. So I'm good to go. I do want to mention on the ESC though, when you mounted it in your frame, be sure that you faced your battery leads out the back. If not, you're going to have to remap your motors. It's not the end of the world, but if you're building this as a new pilot with me, then you are not going to have instructions on it. You'll have to go watch my video on how to remap your motors. Get yourself some double-sided sticky tape, and what we're going to do is we are going to just use it as a holder. Some guys use putty, some guys use this, some guys try to fumble it and juggle it and try to solder it. You can do it any which way you want. I just use a piece like this, and I even leave some of the tape's plastic still on, so that way I'm not fighting myself trying to grab it. And then I place it exactly where I want it because I want them to all look symmetrical and I want them to all look good. And I need it to stay still while I'm working. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut them to length. And what that means is I'm going to put the wire over the solder pad and I'm going to use my cutters to cut it exactly where it's going to solder at. Be sure not to cut them too short because if you cut them too short, you're going to go through hell piecing wires together and heat shrinking them, and then you've got more joints than you need, and you're also going to compromise the integrity of your build. And a build like this with a dollar value like this, we don't want any of that. And that's why I'm kind of walking you guys through this, and I want you guys to see it because I want it to be perfect. After you've cut them to length, go ahead and strip the wires. We got to get down to bare wire. I'm going to zoom you in a little bit. And I know that this is a gauge 20. So that's what I'm using, my 20. Boom. Stripped it. Or it might even be an 18. I'm not sure. But just use the one that fits. Doesn't matter. After you've done it, then what you're going to do is you're going to tin these wires like we're going to do now together. And just touch your iron, touch your solder. Don't make it more complicated than it is. After you've tinned all your wires, then we are going to solder them to the CLR Racing LED. And you'll notice that my middle wire is going to actually be longer than the rest of my wires. And as always, we're going to hit it with some alcohol, make sure that it's nice and clean. I don't like a bunch of leftover flux all over the place. Go ahead and remove our stationary piece that we used. Grab your heat shrink, and this is why we did it this way, so we can get our heat shrink on. So I'm going to go ahead and wiggle down my heat shrink, get it all the way down, and we want to center it to the best of our ability because we want all of our wiring connections to be covered by the heat shrink. It's going to keep us from having any continuity or running anything we're not supposed to electrically through this. Next up is you're going to cut yourself some heat shrink. I wouldn't go over on it because if you cut it too thick, so I'm going to cut it down the middle and then I'm going to cut it down the side because I want it thin and skinny. Don't forget to heat shrink with the heat gun. The reason we want our double-sided sticky tape to be skinny is because if not, every time you get in any dirt, it's going to stick to it and then you're going to have a mess. So go ahead and stick that to the bottom or stick on a bigger piece and then use your scissors to trim it. I mean, really, it doesn't matter. After I get a good squeeze on it, then I go ahead and peel it. And if you're having a hard time, the razor blade is always a good trick. I'll use that to go ahead and peel off the other end of the double-sided sticky tape. And don't peel it off, stick it on, screw it up, pull it off, stick it on, because you're going to lose your stick. So make sure you get it right the first time. So I'm going to line it up before I actually push down on it. Watch this, see? And then I'm going to hit. Boom. Next up is we're going to go ahead and trim our wires so that we can solder this up. Same exact concept. You don't want to be too long and you don't want to be too short. And if we have a little bit extra, that's okay, because if we crash, we don't want it to rip off. So save yourself a couple centimeters extra so that way you got some room to play with just in case something goes wrong. Next up, you're going to strip them. After you strip them, then we want to tin them, of course. And tinning is so important. Do not skip this step. If you have before, then you've learned the hard way why you can't. This thing's really starting to look like a quad now. I am so excited. I can't wait for you guys to see it when it's done. It's definitely a really good build. All right, go ahead and solder your wires to your ESC, and you're going to do that all the way around. There's 4 of them. Go ahead and hit them all. And once you're done, we'll meet back here in the middle, and I'll show you what it's supposed to look like. I'm also going to use my power bench supply to give it a test, and let's see how it's doing. Oh yeah, that is phenomenal news. Of course, you didn't hear a full set of tones, and that's completely normal because we don't have a flight controller. Most ESCs have 2 little holes right on the power lead pads. That is for your capacitor. You don't have to use it. Use tons and tons of solder. Get it super hot. Turn your iron all the way up and get that thing wet. Look at that. My capacitor ain't ever getting ripped off, and I want yours to be just like this. Trim your balance lead if you need to. Go ahead and strip your wires and then tin them. This is your power lead. All of the current from your battery is going to be flowing through this, so do not be shy on the solder. Get it nice and wet. Give it plenty of flow. It's just like a garden hose. If you constrict it, you're not going to get much water. And this is the same concept. If you're restricting it, it's not going to have good flow. You're not going to have good current. And you're just overall, you're not going to perform well. After you're done with that side, go ahead and do the other side. If you've got to use some tweezers, use them. I use them all the time. Once you're done with that, go ahead and take a peek. Make sure nothing's touching. That's very important. You can't have stuff touching. Next thing you're going to do is heat up that same solder and kind of bend your capacitor down, and then I add a little bit of solder on top. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I like a lot of solder on it. And then check your work. Everybody makes mistakes, but you won't know it unless you check your work. It's so important. So I'm going to grab the top of my frame, and I'm going to put it on, make sure everything fits, make sure everything's lined up. You got to do the same. And now it's time for the fun part. So this frame has like a little pocket right here where you see my Crossfire. So I take advantage of this time now to get my Crossfire ready. And if you don't know how to do your Crossfire, I've got a full video on it. I'll put it down in the video description. I got my Crossfire ready. I put it right in this little pocket. And then they give me this cool zip tie spot that's mainly used for your XT60. But I'm going to go ahead and use it, and I'm going to close my Crossfire up in it. So I'm going to lock it down nice and tight. Of course, I'm going with a blue zip tie to match my motors and my camera. Lock it down, cut my extra, and then now it's time to flip it over and we're going to solder it up. In order to do that, we've got to connect our 4-in-1 to our flight controller, and we've got a whole connector pin that does the whole thing all in one shot. That's the one big perk about 4-in-1s. If you're matching it to the flight controller that it belongs to, it's freaking easy peasy. Plug it in, you're done. So now let's tin the pads for our Crossfire. We've got a ground, a 5-volt, and if you don't know, you need a UART. So that means a R and a T of the same number. So I'm going to use R5, T5 because they're right here ready to go. And you see R3, T3. I could use that too if I wanted to. Go ahead and cut it to length, trim them, tin them, and solder them up. I'm going to go ahead and solder my RX and TX. You do put the RX to the TX and the TX to the RX. You can use the color code if you want, but only if you did your Crossfire like I did mine. I'm going to use a TBS Unify Pro. It does come with a pigtail, which brings you from UFL to SMA. Because the way this build is and I have the Axi mount, I'm going to put my UFL type antenna directly on the VTX, and then I don't have to worry about none of that adapting crap. I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick clean because I like everything clean. You guys know how I am. The reason I separated it and then put it back together is because there is no end that'll fit through. So I had to take it apart and then slide it through and put it back together. I'm not going to do any type of unboxing or review on the camera. I am going to unpin the current sensing wire. There's no need for it. Go ahead and get it in your build. Lock it down. This is soft mounted with TPU. One of the perks of why I really like this frame. After you have that, make sure you put your camera angle kind of where you want it. We can always adjust it later. Let's tin the pads. You've got your ground. You've got your positive. Cam.C is your camera control, and then you've got V for video. If you need a full pinout, again, you can refer to my other video on that. And then for your VTX, you got to tin those pads too. You've got your video, your TX2, which we're going to use for smart audio. You've got your positive and your ground. You're going to decide how much voltage comes through. We've got jumper pads right here, and we are going to get them ready. If you solder the middle to the left, you're at battery. Middle to the right is 5 volts, and it's the same for the VTX. Well, for my camera, it can handle anywhere from 5 volts all the way up to like 20-something. So I'm going to go ahead and run battery voltage, and for my VTX, I've got to have a minimum of 7 volts. So I'm going to jump that to the battery side as well. That way I can have full voltage and the VTX isn't looking for power or starving or anything like that. I'm also going to tin a UART number 6, which is T6R6, and that's because my camera has a camera control option. So I don't know why I just tinned the camera control pad because I really didn't need it. This one can actually operate off of a UART, and in our next video, we'll learn how to set that up. For our camera wires, we're going to go ahead and cut them right where we want them. We're going to cut them to length. I always save the extra wire because you never know. Then you're going to strip them, and then you're going to tin them all. Get used to it because you're going to do that a lot. Next up is to get our TBS Unify Pro ready. I went ahead and cut the wires, stripped the wires. Now I'm tinning the wires once again. One thing I also did is I de-pinned a couple wires because I don't need the 5 volts out and I don't need the extra ground. So I went ahead and got rid of those. Now I'm going to go ahead and solder my connector up, and it's just like we talked about. Your ground is your black, your red is your positive, your white is your smart audio, and your yellow is your video. And it is your video out. And just in case you needed to know, because you might be working on a different flight controller than I am. If you're on the same flight controller, then you've got no worries. Just go ahead and do it the way that I'm doing it here. And the last one up is going to be the smart audio. Now that that's connected, let's jump into the camera. Same pattern, if you're not familiar with it, is your red is your power, your black is your ground, and then you've got your video is your yellow. Just except for the camera, it's going to be video in instead of video out. So if your flight controller is saying like VI or VO, you can use that as an indicator to help you out. I accidentally tinned the camera control pad, but I'm going to use a UART because this is the Oscar Liang Run Cam Edition, so I'm going to roll with that. I'm going to put heat shrink on my VTX because I don't want noise. I'm going to put spacers because I need a place to put my VTX, so I'm going to put the spacers, and then I'm going to use the little mounting board that it came with. I mean, why not? Let's get creative. Okay, now that it's locked down, let's go ahead and take a look. Oh yeah, now that's a premium stack. Let's go ahead and heat shrink the VTX because we don't want it touching anything or else we're going to have poor video. Get you some double-sided sticky tape so that way you've got a good grab on your mounting board or whatever your mounting solution may be. Remember, we can use the razor blade to kind of get this stuff off because if not, you're going to spend a half hour doing it and that stuff will really start to drive me crazy. I went ahead and had to use 2 pieces and then I used my scissors and I went around the edges and I trimmed it all up. So unfortunately, the way I had my mounting board didn't work because it's got 2 angled parts. You can kind of see it. So I had to shift the board about 90 degrees so that way my camera has space to tilt back. So now that I've done that, everything goes together seamlessly. I absolutely love it. If you take a look, you can see it's a compact build. We are reaching the finish line. I am so excited. I'm going to put the last few screws in to hold the top plate down. Once I've got the cage on, then we're ready to move forward into setting it up, testing it, doing all that fun stuff. I'm so excited. If you guys got any questions, make sure you drop them down in the video description for me, and I'll go ahead and try to answer them to the best of my ability. One of the last final touches is going to be our antenna. If you're running Crossfire and you've got a big old Immortal T, you might want to do some type of, 3D printing solution. And if you've done that, then great. If you haven't, this always works for me. I put a zip tie, one down by the base of the arm to hold it, and then I'll crisscross 2 to hold the actual Immortal T portion. And that always works. It never gets chewed up because it's on the bottom side. Every now and again, I'll break a zip tie, and then I keep some with me in the field anyways, and I just zip and put another one back on, and then I'm back in action again. So you feel free to do that whichever way works for you. And no, it does not affect my range when I do this because the freaking thing's got a 25-mile radius. If I really lose a mile, I don't think it's going to hurt me. Plus, it's a racing drone. I ain't going that far. All right, let's test it and see how we're doing. You will need a smoke stopper. Do not plug your quad in just pure battery power without a smoke stopper. And then always plug the battery into the smoke stopper first. Make sure you've got a green light. Make sure it's working. After that, go ahead and plug it in and see what you got. Wow, 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 that's so amazing. Yes, the tones did bounce a little bit. That's because I went in and out. I've got the screen in front. No, we don't have video. Oh, because I had the cap on. Now that the cap is off, you can see that our video is great. We are live. Yes, this little monitor really doesn't give the best video, but I can tell right now that my video is going to be flawless. All right, pilots, that is how you build a top high-end racing drone, and it is a 6S drone. This drone is ready for power. We've got a T-motor stack, high name brand TransTEC frame. We've got Hype Train motors, Unify Pro, Crossfire, Run Cam. We've got a souped up drone that is ready to run the track. Or hell, fly around the park if you want with it. I can guarantee this thing is going to go fast. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.